Welcome back to the 1090 podcast. I'm here with Kevin and Bethany, Tenney.
Yep.
And oh my gosh, I just had another thought pop into my head. Do you guys own a pizza shop?
Yep.
Oh my God. We need to talk about this real quick. Right by the hospital, Riverton Hospital.
It used to be.
It's not anymore.
Yeah.
Not anymore. Okay. Me and my buddy Sam, he used to host this podcast with me. We started doing pizza reviews, and we would just review every pizza place we could find in Utah. Because of that Portnoy guy, who like won by Everyone Knows the Rules, we kind of did that for Utah. And I remember we went to your pizza shop and we reviewed your pizza, and I have no idea what I scored it.
Hopefully it wasn't too bad.
No, it was great. And also, I remember you guys don't cut your pizza.
No, we do.
Oh, but maybe that was the one that wasn't cut. And I picked it up and it was one pizza, and we laughed so hard. That's
great. Hilarious. Yeah, that's just someone messing up.
And I forgot about this till just now. Tenneys. Yeah. Sorry, the Brighton a day has just kind of been on my mind, and then I haven't really thought about your last name. Why did you guys want to start a pizza shop? I love pizza. That's like a dream of mine. If I had enough money, like I would give it a go.
I just did it when I was in high school, and then we just kept doing it, So I started in 1994.
And you're still rolling.
Well, so we sold out of all of our Tenneys and stuff before we went. So there was 3 of them.
Yeah.
One of them just switched names. They went to a Beehive Factory or something. I can't remember.
Don't even know.
Yeah, that's the one in Riverton now. And then there's still one in Saratoga Springs.
That is so funny. I love pizza, and I just
we love
pizza.
Love it.
It's like, the thing with pizza is there's really no bad pizza. You can't. I mean, it's always good.
Yeah.
And I had a coach one time. He referred to winning like pizza. He's like, winning's like pizza. Some are better than others, but it's always good. And that's true with pizza.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, not the intro we were expecting. But usually I read the obituary in the intro. And so I typed Brighton's name into Google, and I found this article that I want to read instead. Is that okay with you guys for the intro?
Sure.
All right, you guys probably have no idea what this article even says.
Nope.
Okay, here we go. Every time Kevin Tenney visits a fast food drive-thru, he asks the cashier to add the bill for the car behind him to his check. Without asking for the new total, Tenney pays and leaves a card with the hashtag Brighton a day and is on his way. This ritual is one way the Tenney family copes with the loss of their 4-year-old daughter, Brighton, who died after contracting respiratory
RSV.
Okay. Pneumonia in January. The tradition has also become a way for them to give back to the community that rallied around them when they were in need. I think without having all this Brighton a day thing, it would feel very alone, Kevin said. Just a few months ago, after spending most of their time at Primary Children's Hospital, Kevin and Bethany Tenney, along with their 5 other children, had to make the trip home without Brighton. But upon driving into their neighborhood, the grieving family was surrounded by pink ribbons hanging on trees and a living room full of teddy bears, one of Brighton's favorite toys. Friends and neighbors brought meals every night for a month. They also made a quilt using Brighton's clothes and came by often to check on the family. Literally for the first month, every day, there was something new, and people just didn't stop, Kevin said. Although the pain was still raw, the overwhelming support the Tenneys received helped them get through each day. It was very good for our other kids, Bethany Tenney said. They were struggling too, but for them, it gave them something to look forward to. Strangers also learned of the Tenneys' loss and began to reach out. After one woman started using a hashtag in Brighton's honor, Kevin and Bethany Tenney decided to create one for their own, Brighton a Day. The couple also created a Facebook page to document the service they continued to receive. Cards and wristbands with Brighton a Day were made, and the Tenney family looked for opportunities to hand them out. We have a 9-year-old daughter, and her friends made these bags with treats they just got out of the pantry and put Brighten a Day cards in them and left them in a bunch of parks in our neighborhood. Bethany Tenney said. So for her and for all of our kids, and the same for us, when they feel like they are doing something in memory of Brighty, it makes them feel better about what's going on. And another effort to thank the community that has supported them, Kevin and Bethany Tenney recently created the Brighten a Day Foundation, a nonprofit organization that will plan events for those who have lost a loved one or events for those who have lost a loved one or are in midst of a challenge. We realized we're blessed, and it's a unique situation where somehow her story and her spirit or whatever just really appealed to people, Kevin said. We understood that we're kind of not the norm, and we want to take that platform and try to bless others that are going through equally as hard, if not harder, situations, and try to see if we can give them that same experience that we've had. Sorry, guys, we're not planning on this.
It's all right.
This Friday, the Brighten a Day Foundation will host its first party in honor of what would have been Brighton's 5th birthday on May 19th. The event will be held at Shea Park in Saratoga Springs from 5 to 10:30. Sorry, I just like all these details, so I'm going to just finish it. Yep. Children are asked to wear princess or superhero costumes, and adults are encouraged to wear pink, Brighton's favorite color. A plaque will be placed at the park in Brighton's honor. The Tenney family will use this event to raise money for the foundation. The goal I have in life is after I pass away, that people will remember me for something good, Kevin Tenney said. With Brighton, she was 4, and so many people are rallying around this little girl. To me, that is just amazing. Sorry, I got really choked up because the way you've handled your daughter's passing has really impacted my life. And you guys probably don't even know how much it's impacted my life.
We've never met before.
But I've done public speaking for like a little bit, and there's a part that I always talk about how like no one really cares, like no one's going to remember your name type of thing. Like you really have to understand this is not about you and it's about helping other people. And I kind of say like your name's going to be forgotten, but how you behave won't. And I think you and me, this is a perfect example of it. Like 100 years from now, no one's going to know how much you impacted me. But how you handled Brighton's death impacted Josh Lamborn. Josh Lamborn's a buddy of mine who lost his wife and daughter to a drowning accident. When I lost my family, me and Josh would go to lunch and just chat. And then he's like, hey, I need to introduce you to the Brighten a Day Foundation, which introduced me to my therapist, Matt. And we have gotten so much help that I needed. And now I've helped so many people. And that's just kind of like I feel like I'm Michael Scott in The Office when he's drawing the pyramid scheme now. But like, that's kind of what the trickle down effect is like, you've helped me out. And I guess I'm just rambling on, but what I'm really trying to say is thank you. And thank you for your example. And obviously not happy at all with what happened to Brighton, but have to be thrilled with how you've handled what's happened to Brighton. And I think what you guys have done is amazing. So I just want to tell you thank you. And should be a brutal episode today. Music's in. Life's 10% what happens to you and 90% what you're going to do about it.
as you know, losing a child sucks, and we haven't gone through what you've gone through. Also, like, that's all you can ask for is like, it's like when we had Brighton pass away, we didn't have anybody that had been through what we'd been through and guided us through necessarily. We just had so much love shown to us. But for me, I'm not going to speak for Bethany, but for me, people like you, that's what I care about is even though we never met, you're my people, you know? So the fact that the loss that you had was a little bit better because of something that we went through and tried to create something to help people like yourself, even though we didn't know you, that's humbling for me. So thank you.
No. Well, that article kind of gave us a good foundation to work off of. We kind of have a good starting point. But Kevin, Bethany, where do you guys want to start with your story? Do you want to start a little before you got the news about Brighton, or where do you guys want to start here?
I have no idea.
Bethany, you said before the podcast, like, I haven't talked about this in so long.
So what I would say is, like, when I'm listening to
years.
a podcast and someone has lost somebody, maybe this sounds morbid of myself, but I'm like, I want to hear the story of how this person passed away and like what that was like. So as much as I hate talking about it, I feel like it's a big deal, you know? Yeah. And so I think, so we'll go back to there. And so what happened was, and Bethany's going to correct me because I'm a guy and I don't remember details nearly as good as she does. And I don't know if you have the same thing as me, where when you go through something so traumatic, my memory is absolute shit now. Like I can't remember parts of that day, like, at all. Like,
yeah, I was very confident in what I remembered. And then I talked about it with my family and they're like, no, like, I got so much wrong actually.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Like, my own memory's playing tricks on me here. But yeah, the trauma makes it very difficult.
Very difficult.
Trying to protect you in that moment by just not thinking and memorying stuff because
Well,
it loves you and like wants to protect you.
Well, my brain sucks because I remember everything.
Well, and it's also
still.
like the fact of when you go through a ton of what's the word I'm going for? Trauma. Thank you. Like that first year, having a timeline. I don't know if something was a month after, if it was a year. No clue. Like, I just remember certain things. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. But so Brighton was in the hospital probably like about 10 days before she actually passed away. And she had croup. Mm-hmm. And
we were in the hospital for like 3 days.
Yeah. And she was fine, supposedly. So we brought her home and stuff. And then she started getting a little bit of that croupy cough again, which was normal for us because all of our kids, we've kind of been through the ringer with our kids and their breathing, especially here in Utah. The air is just bad. Our
oldest was hospitalized multiple times for croup. We've had other kids hospitalized for croup. So we felt like we understood it.
You've been here before, yeah.
So
how many kids you have?
We have six kids.
6 kids.
Yeah, Brighton's number 5 out of 6.
Oh my word.
So it was interesting that night. We were watching our friend Drew Manning, who's Fit to Fat to Fit. We talked about him for a second before. He had a TV show that was on Lifetime or something like that. And we were watching it in Brighton because she was a little bit sick. She was in our bed and stuff. So like, these are the good memories I remember. So she just loved us and just loved people so much. And she would tell us, she's sitting there watching us. She's like, she wanted us to kiss in front of her for some reason. And we're like, okay, you know, so we'd kiss and kiss again, you know? And we're watching a show and it seemed like it was just gonna be a normal night, you know? And then she stopped, she was in our bed and she stopped breathing a little bit.
She started coughing, like that nasty barky cough. And it's the middle of winter. So we go downstairs, go outside, sit on the front porch because they need that cold air to open it up. And sat out there for a little while and then it seemed better. But our bedroom is upstairs. And so I was like, I don't want to go all the way upstairs and back down. Anyway, so I told Kevin, I was like, you go to bed. I'll sit on the couch with her and just in case, we'll just lay on the couch because they have to stay propped up too. That also helps drain. Anyway, so we're laying on the couch sleeping, and then all of a sudden same situation, but worse. Now she can't breathe. So
That was the second time.
And I don't have my phone. Yeah, that was the second, that night.
So the first time we went to the hospital, and by the time we got to the hospital, Brighton was breathing fine. And so we're in the car. That was the first time we went to.
No, you're not saying it right.
Okay. This is why we have
Yeah.
live.
This is marriage
wrong.
right
Yeah.
So we went out. This was that night.
Oh.
We went outside, both of us, with her. Everything calmed down. She seemed like she was breathing good. We went back inside. You went upstairs to our bed.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the couch with her. Then it was bad. And I didn't have my phone. I didn't have anything. So I'm, it's 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm screaming upstairs. I'm like, Kevin, we got to go. Cause I was like, we're not doing this. It's bad. We got to go. So we hop in the car, and that's when we drove to the hospital. That was the first time.
Okay. Yeah. So in the first time,
be wrong.
Yeah. So we're there. We're at the hospital, and it's one of those. If you've been to the hospital, like we've been to the hospital with our kids, so many times, where we're like, if you can calm it down before you go in, you don't really have to go. It's just a matter to make sure they're okay. So we're sitting in the car, and Brighton's in the back seat, and we're like, Brighton, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? No, I can breathe. I'm good. I'm like, okay.
Well, and she had just been in the hospital a week before. She did not want to go in the hospital.
She didn't want to go again.
So she's like, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. We're like, okay.
So we said, okay, we'll go home. But we sat in the car for like an hour outside the emergency room because we wanted to make sure. And I'm so honestly, I'm so glad that I have that, because like the guilt of not taking her in is a lot. Also, the fact that we waited there and made sure she was okay, and obviously I guess we were wrong, but we had never done that before. We had never waited that long, and just, it's like, I really felt like we were trying our best.
Regardless, so we went home. We're like, let's go home. It's fine. And you went back upstairs, and I went back on the couch with her. And then it was probably that was when it was 2 hours later. She just woke up freaking out. She couldn't breathe. So I'm like, we have to go to the hospital. We can't sit in the parking lot. We have to go in. So we start driving. And as we're going down, she stops breathing. Like, I'm holding her, and she stops breathing. So I knew we couldn't make it to the hospital we usually go to. So it's like, we have to go to a close hospital. Anyways, and then, so Kevin's pulling down, I think it's 2300 North. And I'm like, he's on 911 on the phone in the car while I'm holding her, and she's not breathing. And then all of a sudden in my arms, she just had a seizure and went lifeless. And so the 911 said, pull over and give her CPR. So we pulled the van over, got her out, laid her on the ground. And I couldn't figure out what to do. So Kevin starts to go do CPR on her, and a car flies up, pulls right in. Before we could even think of what to do. And a lady gets out, and she's like, wasn't it a lady, or was the cop first?
See, that's the problem. We thought it was a lady first, but there was a cop first. I think
there was a cop first. He pulled up first because they called him, and he pulled up, and we go to lay her down. Literally, I felt like it was right after, but I don't know. A lady pulls up, and she's like, I'm a nurse. Let me do CPR. Okay. So she went and did it. And then the ambulance pulled up, but she wasn't breathing or anything within the ambulance. So I got in the ambulance with them. We went to the hospital. And
I wasn't. I had to drive behind the ambulance because I didn't have space.
But we got to the Timpanogos Hospital, and then first they took her in the room, and they wouldn't let us in right away. So I was freaking out. And then they let us in and said, she's doing okay. We have her stable-ish. They're like, we're going to life flight her to primaries. And they said I could go with her. So they got her on there. I went on the life flight with her. Kevin drove up. I think your mom and dad came to drive you.
I went with my parents.
They came to met us at the hospital and then drove them up. So we met at primaries. And yeah, just nothing went right ever. Nothing. We just got there, and it was just, she was not there. And they had tubes everywhere. It was rough. And every time a doctor or nurse would come in, it was never good news. It was always like, I just felt like they were giving us no hope, which is all I wanted.
It was, it's interesting because when you go to the hospital, especially when you're like a primary children's, like, I don't know if it was just me and I'm an idiot, which that it's definitely true. But when you're at a hospital and you get your child or anybody stable, my thought process was, you're going to be fine now because you have the best people. They're stable. You're good. That is so far from the truth. Like, that is not how it works. And I remember the night before she passed, because she was at primary children's for 3 days, and I was trying to fall asleep because we had these chairs, but I didn't want to leave the room. So I was like laying on the ground, which is like concrete. And my sisters and my cousin was there, and they're talking to the nurse. And the nurse didn't want to say how bad it was to us because we still had hope, like I'd play music for her and like her vitals would go up and stuff. And I'm like, okay, maybe she's going to be okay, and she basically just said, yeah, she's gone. Like, if she's alive, she's basically like brain dead. And I just remember like, yeah.
We were both trying to sleep at the time because
I was just shaking. I just remember lying on the ground, just scared to death. Like, what am I going to do? So we wake up the next day, and
the next day, like, we slept maybe an hour.
Yeah, it wasn't much. And I can't remember. Like, again,
everyone had left. So what happened was they had her at least stable-ish again.
Yeah.
And we had, I said, we both come from huge families. Everyone kept coming to see us at the hospital. Well, they were said that day, they said, we can't keep doing what we're letting you do. We've been letting you have everyone come in the room. We're not doing that today. So tell your family not to come up. Like, we need to just keep the room calm today. So I'm like, okay. So it's just me, Kevin, and Bridie in the room. And then you went to get us breakfast. Yeah. And when he left, something happened.
They were giving her a new drug to try to lower her blood pressure or something like that because it was too high. And it did the extreme. Like, it dropped. So all of a sudden,
he got back with food, and all of a sudden everything drops.
Red lights going off. Like,
everyone's running into the room, and it's just like she's dying
again. They revive her.
They made us go out of the room, and we couldn't be in there. So then they get her back. They let us come back in. We're dealing with that. She seems like okay for about 5 minutes, and then she crashes again.
Yeah,
they kick us out of the room again.
All these doctors and nurses just running into the room.
And we're just sitting outside freaking out.
So it happens a second time. They get her back. Next time they brought her back, then the nurse says...
Well, the doctor came out and told us. He was
not nurse. It was a girl.
He said, we can keep doing this as long as you want us to keep doing this. We will revive her as many times as you guys choose. I just want you to know there's no point.
There's no quality of life she will ever have.
She will not. This is not right. And both of us felt like we had to stop.
I mean, at that point, it
was just
that was our third time watching our child die.
It wasn't for her anymore.
Yeah. So she ends up passing away, and there were so many people still waiting in the waiting room. I mean, there was probably 50 people there all the time, just wanting to come back and see her.
Well, first we got the kids up there.
Yeah, we get our kids there, and that's just horrible.
Actually, the kids came after she passed.
Yeah. And we played, she had a favorite song, which is by Charlie Puth, One Call Away. And so we played that song with our kids. Just,
I got to lay next to her and hold her until she passed away. And Kevin was on the other side of her.
Yeah. Yeah, because we took off everything. We're just like, we know she's going to pass. We're going to sit here with her and just be with her. So anyway, so that's the shitty part of the whole thing, which is horrible. When we got back, as you read in that story, it's like we were just, you understand how it's just like you're so destroyed inside. Like I don't even know how to explain. It's like, it's a feeling you can't even explain to someone. It's like, you're so dead inside. Like you just feel like you went to war. And I remember someone picked us up and drove us back to our house. And I just remember I fell asleep in the back of the car. And I remember I woke up as we were pulling into our neighborhood, which you have to pass by a park and stuff. And there's just like pink ribbons. There's trees all the way up. And there's a pink ribbon, like over a half a mile away from our house, just everywhere, just leading up to our house. We get to our house and the whole house just covered with pink ribbons everywhere. And then we go inside, and Brighton just loved stuffed animals. And they thought they did a stuffed animal drive to give to her in the hospital. And then she never got to see him. And so the whole room was filled with stuffed animals, just filled. So when she passed away, we're like, you know what are we going to do with all these stuffed animals? So we're like, this is crushing so many people in the community. Let's give all the kids that were her age or anybody that wants to remember Brighton, come take a stuffed animal, whichever one you want from here. That's your memory.
First, our kids all picked one.
Yeah.
And like we let her best friends come over and pick them.
Yeah.
And all of her cousins, which was a lot.
Yeah. So then what happened was, as you mentioned in the very beginning, we have a pizza place, and this woman who used to live in Eagle Mountain, her name's Dana Pruner. I always give a shout out to her, even though I think I've met her once in life. She had started something where she knew we were in the hospital, and her father had passed away like a year or two prior. And so she kind of had a goal of helping people when they're going through shit, and she had set up something where she wanted people to buy gift certificates to Tenney's Pizza to support us because, medical bills and all these things. And she had a hashtag that was like prayers for Brighton or something like that. And I'm like, I was appreciative of it, but I'm like, that's just not catchy. That, like in the future, when I realized how this doesn't have to all be shit. It can be beautiful too, And so we're going through these days after Brighton passed away, and people just kept on showing up and just kept on like being kind. And I remember it was a couple of days after, and we were going to sleep, and I said to Bethany, I'm like, I feel horrible because I feel like I should feel worse than I do. But because so many people are here showing so much love, I feel like I'm not in as bad of a place as where I should be, which is such a weird thing to say. But
your shame talking.
Yeah. As I'm going through it, I'm like, this is beautiful though, because what had happened was, and I like to say this to people because I don't think people understand this aspect of life. I'm a type of person, and I know lots of people are like this, where when you're going through hard things, you don't want to have to ask for help. You don't like to receive help. Well, what you're doing when you do that and someone's offering to do something kind for you, you're basically shutting them out of a beautiful experience where they're trying to connect with you. They're trying to grieve with you. And I kind of made a mental note where I said, anyone that wants to do anything, I'm going to let them, which is not me at all. I don't like that. And because of that, it really changed me for sure. And I feel like it made it where other people wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to be a part of this movement of kindness and love and like doing good deeds for people. And so after we saw this like a month or so, when you're going through this much grief, you're trying to find anything you can that brings you any sort of happiness, because happiness is like the last thing that you feel like you're ever going to feel again when you're going through this. And for some reason, like, it just made her feel alive to me. And in the beginning, Bethany wasn't on the same page, and I understand that, but it was pretty much for me. I just needed something that was bigger than me, because I couldn't I couldn't deal with it.
Yeah, I remember there's so much support and love at first. And I remember being upset. I remember the viewing. I mean, there's 4 caskets because Riggins and Frankie are sharing one. And I remember just being so mad. Like, I can't believe they're making me stand here. And there's so many people that showed up. And I mean, I think trauma and grief just makes you selfish in general. It just forces you to think about you and your issues all day long. And it took me a while to look back. And I think this is what you're saying is kind of what you understood at the very beginning. And it took me a while to understand was like, this is for the community. Like, they are grieving too. They love you. They love your family. Like, you're not the only person that experiences death, Mason. Like, death is a big part of community in our culture. And they're grieving too, and they want to help you. And it took me a while to realize, like, funerals and those things it's not just about the person grieving. It's more about the community and allowing them to help carry the load of your pain for a while. But I think I was more like Bethany, it sounds like, at the beginning, is I was just so, probably just shock and denial, honestly. But then mad too. And I'm still working on the gratitude thing. But man, people showed up for me so much. And that's why I think I'm so touched by it when I was reading that article in our intros. You guys have done such a good job of starting a foundation, doing events in honor of Brighton and to help other people like me. And that, I mean, when I was reading that, I was reading about me. Like, I'm the one they're referring to. Like, when it says they're going to help other people, like, me. Like, it's me. I'm the one in the article now. And I feel that connection with you. I do have, Bethany, I want to go back with you. Mm-hmm. You're holding Brighton and she has that seizure. Mm-hmm. You're a mom of 6 kids. This type of sickness is common in your family. Was that seizure like the beginning of, where did you guys enter shock and denial or grief, or like, when did that happen? The day of, like, or the days of?
Honestly, until that moment, I figured it was all we'd get there.
Like, she's not going to die.
No.
She thought that she was going to be a vegetable, and she was okay with raising her like that for the rest of her life because she's a mom, and that's what she would do.
I would say I'm okay with it. I just was willing to do anything. I was like, whatever we got to do, keep her alive. We'll figure it out. We'll make it work. And I always just think, which is, again, like the cockiness. I'm like, no, they're my kids. Like, we are stubborn as hell. You don't know what my kids can, like, if anyone's going to make it, it's my kid. Yeah. And so do
you feel like you were giving up if you did that? Like, we can't give up on her. Like,
yeah, kind of. I felt like, no, she can pull out of this. Like, this, it's possible. And if someone was like, well, there's a small chance, I'm like, yep, that's all I need. Small chance. Got it. So that,
just can't accept it. Like, I'm not.
The seizure freaked me out for many reasons. Because 1, for that. For 2, my kids, it's not my first seizure I've dealt with my children or her. That was not her first seizure. So
when you got to the hospital and they wouldn't let you in and you said you were freaking out, what does that look like?
Like, I actually I've told Kevin this. I'm like, I feel bad for the driver of the paramedics. Yeah. I was screaming, like, just scared to death. What? I don't even remember, but I remember, like, wailing. Like, I never really understood that word. Heard it my whole life until that driving the ambulance. It was just me and the driver, and obviously everyone's in the back. I can hear them working on her back there. And I just remember, like, just wailing, just like almost anger, scared, sadness, screaming. Like, there's no fucking way this is happening to me. Yeah. And I couldn't calm down. So when we got to the hospital and she's in there and I still can't see her, it was like, I'm just sobbing uncontrollably, like, let me be in there. Like, she needs me in there. So luckily it wasn't for too long. And they were really good to us, like, allowing us to be in there and allowing me on the life flight. That meant everything to me because I never wanted to leave her side through the whole thing. I was with her. I was holding her hand for 3 days. The only time I'd stop is to go hold my baby because I felt bad for him because he was
one.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I was glad.
You know, it's interesting because you've talked about Matt Quackenbush, who Bethany and him used to do the Finding Strength podcast together, and Brittany and Matt do it now. Well, they had the fire chief of Lehigh on, and we found this out years later as they're doing the podcast.
Yeah, I was asking him questions.
The
and he
cop
told me
that showed up for Brighton in the very beginning, it fucked him up so bad he quit from that call, and we found out about it from the podcast from Jeremy Crofts, who's the Lehigh chief, and we had no idea. And I'm like, this is crazy. Life is crazy. Like how sometimes you find out these stories afterwards, and it's like, seriously.
But I will say, like, I used to feel bad. So Kevin starts this Brighton a Day thing, and I was a mess. When he says, like, don't get me wrong, I will forever be grateful for that community because they were amazing and it was beautiful. Also, I didn't care. I was so grateful for Kevin. I was so grateful for my kids.
Didn't care because
it's
not bringing him back.
Yeah.
Bringing her back.
I just didn't care. I was so angry. I was so upset. I was so devastated. I just thought, I just wanted to die.
Yeah, like feeling any type of love or gratitude or joy right now just seems so evil and wrong. Mm-hmm. You want nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. I would go to bed every night and I would just be like, if there's a God, let me die. Like, do not let me wake up tomorrow. And then I'd wake up and I'd be like, awesome, here we go.
And she didn't realize that she would say this in front of the kids sometimes.
I said this on my podcast. This is what kind of helped me flip a switch, but I didn't realize I was saying it out loud. I thought in my head, I was just saying, I want to die. I want to die. And my kids were hearing it. And my daughter, Hallie, who's 13, 14?
At the time, yeah.
At the time. One day she was like, she just came and yelled at me. And she's like, stop saying that. I'm like, saying what? She's like, stop saying you want to die. She's like, that sucks. That sucks for all of us.
You have 5 other kids.
Yeah. She's like, Brighton's your only child. We have 5 other kids. She's like, stop doing that. And it best thing that ever happened to me. It knocked me on my ass and I was like, you are right. And that was it. I never said it again. I never felt it again. I was like, and I made it a point from that moment on for those 5 kids to know they're equally as important as she ever was. And they always will be. And that I will always keep fighting and trying because they're that important to me.
I will say, going through this whole thing, it's like, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Also, to see, a mother's love for a child, you hear about that, but I don't think anyone can witness it until your back's against the wall and you see your child going through the worst. The mom is going through that. It's like, I tell people all the time, it's like, as a father, and this is my own personal opinion, we go to work every day. We're not with the kids all the time. A mom, it's like, to me, there's not a better age of a child than a 4-year-old. Like, they're just starting to get their personality. They're so much fun. They're still so innocent. They're so loving still. And this child is with their mother all day, every day. And I thought about it. I'm like, it crushed me. And I was with her half as much as Bethany. So now, and it's like my day didn't revolve around seeing, oh, Brighton's not here now. It's like she was never at my work, really. But Bethany, everywhere she turns, is a witness of her child is gone. And to see her grieve as hard as she did, as hard as it was for me to witness it, looking back at it, it's beautiful also.
How do you guys manage? It's hard when you lose a kid as a married couple, obviously. Sounds like you guys have different styles of grieving at first.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give our listeners what that was like, or maybe some advice on what to do, what not to do, because people do handle grief differently, and it can be really hard at first.
I think the best example, so one of the families that we met later was Orlando and Wendy Paloa. They had a son named Kalai that passed away, and we met them for the first time. And he grieved the same way I did, and she grieved the same way that Bethany did. And the way that we grieve, so the way I grieve is I like people around. I like to, and not just any people, it has to be the people that I feel like if I want to cry, I'm comfortable crying in front of them, just where there's no judgment, just pure love. And that's how I like it. She's not like that. So and I didn't get it. I didn't get it until it was weird. For me, it's like you have these different phases of grief, right? The hardest day I ever had with grieving Brighton was on her 2-year Angel Day. 2 years later was my hardest day, which seems crazy, but I'm so glad I had that because it made me finally get her. And what had happened was I always would get to, okay, on our 2-year Angel Day, we're going to do the workout because we had a CrossFit gym we owned too, and they were so great. And we'd do a workout in Brady's name and stuff. And to me, that was great. It was just people showing up and supporting, and they're part of it. And it was almost like I did it for them too, because it's like, I don't know. I don't even know why I did it. Anyway. And I remember that day, it was just such a hard day. And I was just like crying all day. And I remember we had all these people coming to CrossFit, and I didn't want to go. And I was like, duh, you asshole. This is what Bethany's been like the whole time. And you're forcing her to do something when she's at her lowest. And here you are, you're grieving the way she has, and probably not even to the same extent. And you don't want to go now. And I was like, okay, never again. I'm not doing this ever again. I promise you, I will not do something that you're not good with, because it sucks. And I'm really sorry that I did this to you for years. So.
And at the same time, then we talked and we found a happy medium. I said, because he's like, what do you need? I'm like, all I want on her day, I just want to be with you and our kids. And I just want to cry. I want to think about her. I want to look at her pictures. I want to watch her videos. I want to do all the things that I know that I avoid all year long. So I don't cry. I want to do them all. And I just want to immerse myself in. I want to feel everything. So that way I have at least a break after this day. And so I said, I'm like, what if it's just our family. We just spend time together, and then till like 5 p.m. And then if you'd like to have people over, we can do dinner, have some drinks, kind of relax. And it can be a little funner, a little more lighthearted because we've been crying all day.
Yeah.
And that's what we did for
perfect.
years.
Yeah.
And our kids love it. We've loved it.
Well, I think you guys both are representing a good part of grief. Like their joy. There should be part of grief is joy. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know. I think that should be talked about more. Because usually my understanding of grief is like just be sad. We're sad because we loved them and they're gone. And so like the more sad I am, then the more I loved them, I think. And that I think there's actually a lot of truth to that. But another part of grief is gratitude for what you had with them, mm-hmm. and all the good moments you had with them. That should be celebrated. That should be talked about. And in a way, if you celebrate and talk about it, you are kind of keeping them alive in a way. And I think you guys together are doing both those things very beautifully. And I think understanding that it's different and giving each other space and seeing it from the other point of view is, I don't know how you guys got to that point to have that mindset, but I think it's very healthy and it's a beautiful thing. So good job.
Thank you. Actually, I had a question for you. This is something that I've wondered before, because obviously you lost 2 children and your wife, right? Mm-hmm. What does that look like? When I ask that, I mean, I lost a child. I know what that feels like. But you lost 2 and a wife. Like, where does your mind go with that? Like,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Because, like, for instance, me and Bethany are so close.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and you had a brother and a nephew, where I'm like, if I was you, I don't know if I would even think about my brother and my nephew, because the other one is just so high. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, where normally if you lose a brother it's so intense, but like what you went through is like ridiculous. Like, and so the mind, I can't, I've been through shit and I think of your story and I'm like, where does your mind go with that whole thing? Who are you focused on? Because there's just so much, like, what does that look like?
So I did a event with Matt actually a couple days ago. And part of my speaking thing, I did this thing called parts. I had 12 other people come up on stage with me that represented a part of me, like anger, denial, shame, guilt, all those things.
Yeah, like the parts work.
Yeah, and then I had 5 other people stand up that represented Courtney Riggins, Frankie, Race, Ryder. And Kevin, the question you just asked me is a question I asked Matt, my therapist. Like, I don't know. I'm working on it. And I don't know. I think what you just said about, like, can I even grieve over Race and Ryder? I don't know if I've really even gotten to them quite yet. Like, I obviously have. But in a real way, like, not like I have with Courtney and Riggins and Frankie. But my head just spins from one to the other. Like, I'll be thinking and trying to talk and grieve over Courtney, and then it just shifts to Riggs, and then Frankie. And then we'll go, I haven't talked about Ryder in a while. And then Race. And it's very frustrating because sometimes when I'm talking to myself, like, I don't even know what it's like to just lose a spouse. I honestly don't know. I don't know if I know. Or I don't know what it's like to just lose a daughter. I don't know if it's combined with everything, or I'm having a really tough time figuring all that out. And just kind of, I think the best way to explain it is just kind of constantly daydreaming, or maybe having conversations with them and trying to do that. And then there's guilt involved too.
That's what I'm saying. Like
well,
I try to put myself in your shoes and I'm like, that is the biggest mind fuck I've ever heard of in my life. Like, so the fact that you're doing this is, again, it's horrible what happened to you guys, your family. But this is beautiful that you are doing this. And I know you've heard that before, but like, what we did is beautiful. What you did and are doing is incredible, because I know what it feels like to lose a single child. I don't know what it feels like to lose everything almost. Yeah. Literally almost everything. You had one child left. That's crazy. That's crazy, like. So anyway, massive props. And I just really I wanted to ask you that question because I've heard you.
It's a question I don't know if I'll ever get the answer to it, but I think trying to find the answer is worth it, and there's some good that's coming from it. But yeah, it's a good question, man. But I think if I can try to answer it one more time, and then we'll move on. Yeah. But like, tomorrow is Riggins' birthday, and so I'm writing him a letter. And I think this is a good example of what I mean. So at the beginning of the letter, I'll tell Courtney, Riggins, Frankie, Race, right? Well, I'll tell all of them except Riggins, I love you, thinking of you, but this is their
Riggins. Day.
This is just Riggins' letter.
Yeah.
And that helps me just
get rid of the guilt.
Riggs. Yeah.
Get rid of the guilt.
That little moment. Yeah. And I think that's a good example of how to do it. And I am hoping as more time goes by, I'll be able to, as the shock and denial continue to go away, I'm hoping I'll be able to do that better. But yeah, it's a whirlwind.
How long has it been?
Just hit the 3-year mark.
Okay.
I was what year? When did Brighton pass away?
8 years.
8 years ago.
So we're 8.
2016, January 24th, 2016.
8 years away versus 3 years away. Any pointers?
It gets better.
In what way?
I feel like for me, like, the anger's gone.
Wow.
So I'm still sad. I'm not mad anymore. And that's big. Like, that's been a huge
till that anger kind of
So honestly, I had to move.
Yesterday.
Not that long ago, but I had to move. I didn't know I had to move. I mean, I got to a point for so many reasons where Utah became very toxic for me. I had a lot of trauma here. I mean, my mom passed away here when I was young, and that was a mess. And then I have a lot of good here too. Like, don't get me wrong, I have a great life, but everything that happened with Brighty and things that happened afterwards, it was creating just this. I just felt like I was in this anger spiral all the time. I was just mad. So when we moved, And I did a lot of work. I went to therapy and that did help. And I got through some things, but there was just still this, like a weight. And when we moved, it took me a little while because I had to get comfortable there. So it was probably like a year ago, I would say.
Well,
That I finally it was just, I don't know. Kevin and I were talking, we talk a lot at night, like deep conversations. We'll lay in bed sometimes for hours and talk about what we're thinking, just life. And one night I told him, I was like, he actually was looking at me and he's like, what are you thinking? I'm like, I don't even know how to explain what I'm thinking right now. I'll tell you about it tomorrow. But I have a lot of thoughts going right now. And the next day I woke up, I'm like, you know what? I'm not mad anymore. It was literally just like that. Like, I'm not mad anymore. I see it different. I see things different. And, there was a lot of things that had happened with us in Utah and stuff. And that I was like, I feel like for some reason I can see the other side a little bit now. And it just gave me some perspective. Anyways, so I'm still sad. It's still, I would say I still cry a decent amount. It's just not as long.
yeah.
I'll be in the car and a song comes on that makes me think of her and I'll cry through the song. And then I can be fine. No one has to even know it happened.
Yeah.
But it was like, it's good. And for me, I think the other part, moving and being like, we live by a beach. So that's like meditative for me. It's really just changed a lot of things
Who
about me
doesn't
to
love
be
the
able to
beach?
go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just being in warm weather.
Kevin, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Sorry, you're about to say something.
No, go ahead. Ask me.
I want to get back to your shame and guilt about in the parking lot. Do you remember when you mentioned that? You were with Brighton in the parking lot for like an hour, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Shame and guilt is something I struggle with a great deal. How did you handle that?
That's a good question because I think on that certain.
Sorry. I'm not saying you should feel bad.
No.
I think that's why people are scared to ask sometimes. Is like, why you shouldn't feel bad.
No. I think again we had been through that scenario before, and I guess the reality was I wasn't opposed to going into the hospital. So that was the thing. It's not like I was trying not to go to the hospital. It had nothing to do with that. It was all about Brighton for me at that point. And where I'm watching this little girl, she had just come out of the hospital. And again, with croup, we've done it where it's like when you get outside and you're in the cold, usually it'll go away and you're fine. So to think of bringing this little girl back to the hospital when we've done this before and our kids have always been fine, and knowing that we waited there for that long just to be safe, I was comforted by that because I'm like, I don't even know why I did that. Like, I don't even know why I waited that long. Like, normally old me is like, well, it's late. I want to go back to bed. So she's fine. Let's go, and we didn't do that. And again, I don't know why we didn't do that, but yeah, and maybe you can relate to this. I think as a father, like we have different roles than mothers do. And there's just, and maybe you have this, maybe you don't, but like you feel like you're a protector. At least I feel like I'm a protector of my family. And when you can't protect them, you didn't do your job.
Yeah.
And like, there's this video that I have of Brighton where she's on my lap and stuff. And like, it crushes me because like she's looking at me and again, I'm saying the words that I feel like she's saying in her mind where she's like, there's just 100% trust and it crushes me because I'm like, you knew I was your protector and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. It sucks, like you go back and you replay like, what could I have changed? What could I have done differently? And it's like every single thing that I think about, I'm like, at the end of it, I did the best I could. And I know that for myself. And I know that Bethany, I'm so glad I was there with her because she beat the shit out of herself over that. And me being able to tell her, we've never done this before. We never did what we did with Brighton. We took more precautions than we ever had. You did nothing wrong. I'm so glad that I was there because I don't know if she'd still be beating herself. Maybe she is still beating herself up. And I don't know.
The thing with shame and guilt is it doesn't have to make any sense.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to like it's kind of like a dream where it's so ridiculous, but when you're in the dream, it feels very real. Like that's shame and guilt. Like and I think that's why talk therapy is so helpful for my shame and guilt. Because sometimes when I say it out loud, I'm like that's ridiculous.
So
And you hear it and you're like, that doesn't even make any sense. But like that self-talk and shame and guilt and being so mad at myself for not being in the car. I just feel like if I was driving, at least Race and Ryder probably aren't with us. So at least that whole family's fine still. So like that guilt and shame that I have, like, but when I actually talk about it out loud, like none of them, it just sounds silly. And I think that's why, even though it's very scary and difficult and painful to talk about, I think talking about it does help. Because I mean, look at you, how you talked about it. Like I asked you about your shame and guilt and you just dived in about how you're explaining to your own mind how you actually did a really good job. Like you actually went beyond what you usually do.
Yeah.
But your shame and guilt somehow like, no, like
you're still the protector.
Doesn't have to make sense. Like, no, you're the protectors in there. And so it's your fault.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's awful.
Yeah. It's
Bethany, how about you how'd you do with that?
Oh, the guilt?
Yeah.
That took me a long time, a really long time. I just felt kind of the same way Kevin did. It was interesting because he didn't tell me about the protector thing till I think years later. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm sorry. I never realized that I just didn't recognize that a lot of his guilt was the same as mine. I thought this is all on me. He's not the one with them all the time. I know these kids. I know what they're allergic to. I know what they can have, what they don't like, what they like. I know it all. He's not there. He doesn't know this stuff. I felt like it was on me. And so it was just interesting because both of us were having this guilt like it was our fault. But when we looked at the other, I'd never thought and he did anything wrong or is bad. And he's never thought I've done anything wrong. So
that's so funny because like every time I've had someone on my podcast and we talk about shame and guilt, every time I am thinking of their story, I mean, you're spot on. I think there's no way you should feel bad.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way. But then when I think of myself, like, yeah, you should feel bad. Like, why?
You're like, you weren't even there. Like,
yeah,
you were like,
why does that happen?
Yeah.
But you're so right. Like, yeah.
So the more we talked about it with each other and like shared that with each other, even though sometimes it probably felt like with Kevin, like beating a dead horse, like having to tell me, reassure me all the time, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Well, like grief, shame, it's just like eating, brushing your teeth. Like, how often are you doing that? Mm-hmm. I really think that's what it's like. Like, how often are you talking about them? How often? Like, I do think it's like working out. If you fall out of the routine, you get out of shape super fast, and your grief can just consume you quickly again, and you feel powerless and out of control. But I do think it's a daily grind of grieving over them.
Well, and if you think about grief, like when you're going through grief, what do you want to do? You want to pull away from everybody and just be to yourself.
Isolate.
When the reality is that's the worst thing you can do, because not that you don't need your own time. Everyone's going to get their own space, but to be able to get out your thoughts and just, it's almost like sometimes it doesn't even matter if it's right or wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
Just to get it out of your body is huge, just to talk about it, because then you can have someone that can.
I was going to say, even it's funny. I was just thinking. I remember one of the times. I'm sure it took multiple. One of the things that was drastically helpful for me. So we were on vacation in Cabo with all of our best friends. Matt and Brenda were there, and we have unique friendships. And when I say unique, it's incredible. Like, we talk about everything. So we're on a couple's vacation in Cabo, I believe. And one night we're just kind of, started, some of us were bickering with our spouse. And so we kind of sat down together and we're like talking out our marital issues, like, well, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And of course, Matt's one of our besties and he's
like,
a
this
therapist.
is great group therapy.
So it's almost like he's
is
leading a
great.
therapy session with all of us. And then I just remember, so two of my best friends, Sarah and Annie, they're nurses. And I remember Bridie came up and we were talking about the guilt and how it's still so heavy. And this was 5 years after she had been gone. And I remember Annie saying to me, because I was like, I screwed up. I messed up. If I had done what I should have done, it'd be different. Everything would be different. And Annie was like, I'm a nurse. I'm around this all the time. I would have done exactly what you did. Don't ever say that you did something wrong. And just because she is she's an amazing nurse and she is great in her field. And it just was like this huge comfort. Like, okay, so it's not just because I'm a stupid mom. Like I really did do it right. It just still sucks.
Yeah. How often do you guys talk about Brighton with your other kids? Or
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
what, talking about them, what do you think that, like, what am I trying to ask you? Like, how beneficial is that?
Huge.
I mean,
So
it's awesome. what
for
it does.
me, for instance, my mom passed away when I was 11 and it was pretty tragic, like of cancer. And we had 10 kids and it was a mess. And my dad got remarried, I want to say a couple of years later. And every picture of my mom came down in the house and we never talked about my mom. We would talk about my mom like once a year on her birthday.
It was really weird. So like me coming into the family, like they would go to her grave once a year and they'd all stand there and
We'd just sit and cry.
They wouldn't say anything. And I'm like, this is bizarre. Like, cause again, I'm the talker. I like, let's talk about it. Like,
But-
like
Tell me a story.
But
Yeah.
it's because we didn't ever grieve.
they never had the
don't know how.
opportunity.
We never dealt with it. And so we'd go to my mom's grave and we were also overwhelmed with emotion. We wouldn't talk or say it. We'd just be crying.
Like, I've never talked about it. I'm not starting now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
So when Bridie died, Kevin and I both said, we're not doing
Yeah, we're not
I don't
doing
want
that.
that. I hated that. I wish we talked about my mom all the time and we were going to talk about her. And the kids, I mean, I'm not even kidding. We went, our family trip, we went to New York with all the kids and a couple of months ago. And on the trip, Brindley was like, what do you think Bridie would want to see when she's here? And we say or just barely. I went to Morgan Wallen with 3 of my kids. We drove to Tampa and went to the concert. And at the concert, my 2 girls were like, oh, if Bridie was alive, she would totally be here with us. She would love this.
oh, that's so great.
So we literally talk about her. We
Yeah.
bring her up in every situation, what she would do.
It was actually really beautiful. Probably a couple months ago, our daughter Brinley, who's now 18, but she was 9 when this all happened. She just came. Yeah, it's like, and she just was having a rough day, and we're like, "Oh, what's going on?" She's just like, "I'm thinking about Brighton," and it was interesting while we were going through everything. You know, Brinley is the next child up from Brighton, so she was 9 and Brighton was 4.
Like they shared a room.
Yeah, and like I'm such an idiot. Like she felt so old to me at that time. And I look back and it's like our youngest son now named Ripken, he's 10 and he seems so young to me. And I'm like, Brinley was younger than him. And we felt like she was just going to be able to deal with this shit. Like, and here she is 8 years later having a meltdown. And I'm like, I'm so glad we built a relationship with our kids where we invite that. And we just sat and we cried with her.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful, like to be able to do that. I'm so glad that she trusted us to have that experience with her because we made an effort to make sure that she's always talked about, you know?
Yeah, I think that's something that's helped me and Blue out so much is just how often we talk about them. And we both feel they're so comfortable to always bring them up wherever, whenever.
It's like they're never gone.
And I remember I had parent-teacher conference with Blue's teacher. And she's like, Blue just told me the story of what happened to your family. And I'm just so... And I'm like, oh, he talks about him. And she's like, yeah, all the time. And I'm like, that's so awesome,
That is
Blue.
awesome.
Yeah.
Like, he mentions it. He talks about it. And I just loved hearing that. And yeah, I think that helps the healing a lot is talking about them. And really scary at first, a lot of fear there, but if you push through, you find a lot of beauty and love and gratitude, I think. Movies. Brighton like movies at all?
Oh, she loved movies.
Well, we usually end the podcast with movies. Before we get to the movies, is there anything else you guys want to say before we wrap this up?
I would just say, maybe like what I've learned through Brighton a Day is this. Everyone goes through some sort of trauma in life. The people that are listening to this podcast right now are not necessarily going to lose a child, but everyone's going to go through trauma. And to me, the way that you go through trauma and the way you build relationships that are meaningful is to continually be there for people, be vulnerable with people, and love people. And it's amazing what you can get through in life if you feel like people are in your corner. And I feel like that's what happened with us. And I saw the beauty in it where I really, and that's what Brighton was. Brighton, like her name just was perfect for her. I mean, we changed her name the day that she was born just because we liked another name better. And then she just came out and I'm like, that's a Brighton, and like.
What was the other name?
What was it? It was
Blakely.
Yeah, it was Blakely. Yeah.
Brighton's way better.
Yeah, exactly.
No offense to Blakely.
Yeah. And so anyway, it just going through this experience just made me really realize like I wasn't a good friend before. I wasn't a good listener. It's changed me completely. And so we talk about how horrible things can be and they can stay that way if you want them to, or you can find the beauty in the shit and it can change you as a person and you can be better because of it. Where I feel like I'm a much better version of myself now than I ever was before this accident.
I feel that way too. I know it's hard to talk about yourself. It just kind of sucks. But you guys at the Brighton a Day Foundation, I love your 90%. Like, it's the 1090 podcast, obviously. Can you guys just talk a little bit about all the things you've done with the Brighton a Day? Like, I know it sucks, but like, you got to do it because it's so cool and it's so inspiring and it's inspired me. It's
changed a little bit because when that article was written, which is like when you go through an experience, like you're not going to hit a home run right with every single idea right at the very beginning. And so the beginning was where, okay, if someone has a thing happen, let's do an event for them, like what happened with us. And we did that a couple of times. Like we did that for Josh Lamborn. We did that for Reagan Anderson that passed away. And we realized we're like, this is a lot of work. This is emotionally draining. And it's hard for the families. Like just because that's what I like, a lot of people don't like that. And it was a lot of work on us. And then we're like, okay, let's maybe not do that. If people want to give, they're going to give, and we'll raise money for people and stuff. And then it kind of turned into we're just a small foundation. We're not going to, change anyone's lives with the money that we're going to be able to give to them. What they need is this. They need the communication way more than anything else, the connection. And a lot of times I can tell if I'm connected to somebody, like if we're going to be good because of like your life beliefs are your same as your death beliefs. So if, for instance, we're not religious anymore. So if someone's super religious, I have a real hard time connecting with that person because our thoughts of what happens after you die is different from each other. And so I'll find someone in this Brighton a Day family that I feel like can relate to them better than maybe I can. I can relate to them somewhat. And then the other aspect, I don't ever want to crush somebody and say, well, I don't agree with you on that. There's, whatever, because I could be wrong too. No one's right. So that's one part. What are some, I've talked too much. Bethany needs to talk more.
No, I was going to say, I had a thought circling back to when we were talking about how Kevin was like, oh, this is so great. Let's do Brighton a Day. Blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, I hate this. What are you doing to me? I want to crawl in a hole and you're making me go talk to people. But what happened was, and I still didn't like aspects of it, but I would meet the mom like we'd have these events, we'd have something, we'd meet them for dinner. We would do different things with the Brighton a Day. And the mom of the child that passed away, when I would see them, meet them, first time, never met them. And I go up to them and I, like all of them, I think we sat and just held each other and cried. Because it was like this, like, we don't have to be best friends, but I get you. Like, this really sucks. And I know it sucks. So that was my favorite part. Even though it was hard, it was like, I could go over and just hug this mom and like, we feel each other. We don't have to say anything. And that connection that I have found with all these women, like, even though we're not best friends, we don't hang out, we don't talk hardly ever, we will always be connected. That meant a lot to me.
So some of the other things that we do, I actually tried to do it for you, but you were the toughest one to do it for because your brain is like mine and we're all over the place. Like where we would do cards, business cards.
Oh, I remember maybe you messaged me about this.
We went back and forth. You should remember this, but
I do remember this now.
Yeah, we had the cards all designed and then you wanted to change it. And I'm like, well, what are you doing it for? Are you doing it for your events or are you doing it for this? You're like, that's a great question. I don't know. So then we just didn't do anything with it. Yeah, it's all right. I don't care.
Sounds like me.
Yeah, no. So we would do these because one thing that some parents said was biggest thing is I just don't want my child to be forgotten. I don't want this person to be forgotten. And so doing these business cards where you do kind acts for people and you do it in the name of somebody else, it makes their child live on through these kind acts. And so we started doing these for these different families and the healing that it did for them, where it cost the foundation, $30 to get 1,000 cards made up for them. It's like big deal, that was a big deal for them. And we would take their cards and we would do some for them as well. Because when we were going through it, we had all these Brighton a Day cards. So we passed out, I think it was 50,000 Brighton a Day cards, which means 50,000 acts of kindness in her name. So that was a big deal. The other things we do is we do counseling or therapy through Matt and Brindy.
Yeah, Josh is like, you got to see Matt.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I could afford Matt. Like because he's good.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, Brighton
a Day. Yeah.
I'm like, what's Brighton a Day? And then he told me about you guys. I'm like, no way. That is so cool.
I feel like that's the most beneficial.
So we do that a lot right now. Yeah.
This connection because, for instance, right after Brady passed away, I didn't know Matt very good at all. I knew who he was and that was it. And Kevin and I went to therapy because that's what everyone told us to do.
Yeah.
And it was
horrible.
Awful.
Horrible.
He was a terrible therapist, this guy. He literally
that was my experience.
Started getting us to like get us to
pin us against each other. I'm like, whoa.
Aren't you mad at her? And aren't you mad?
Yeah, it was
Are you gonna let him talk to you like I'm like, what did I do? What are you?
Kevin's like, we're very sarcastic with each other, always have been. And then Kevin kind of being sarcastic with me. He's like, so you're gonna let him talk to you like that? I'm like, seriously? What are you doing? So that was the end of that. So because of that experience, and then Matt, who is a member of our gym and one of our trainers, and so we knew them, we just weren't tight. He offered therapy for us and our kids to be like, I can help. And I tell you what, that man has saved our family. Like, he has done therapy for every one of my kids, and they will tell you, like, they absolutely worship him because not only, like, he's one of our best friends, but my kids could go talk to him and he has never told me a thing they talk about. He tells me how I can be a better mom sometimes to them. Like, he does. One time he was like, after he had a therapy session with one of our kids, he's like, okay, come in. I need to talk to you. I'm like, okay. He doesn't tell me anything they say, but he's like, here's some things you can do that will help. And it was amazing. Yeah. I'm like, thank you. Like, tell him, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, Matt was like, it was just like talking to a friend. Yeah. I think that's why he becomes friends with everyone.
Well, you can tell.
And then, I'm like, I don't know.
You can feel how much compassion he has for you because he'll sit there and he'll cry with you, and you're like, this dude sees things all day long, and you feel me still. You feel my hurt and my sorrow, and you're here with me doing this. Sorry, the last thing that we do at Brighton a Day that we've been doing it for like the last 5 years is we do something called Brighton a Christmas, which we need to get your name on this. I tried to get your address. Josh, again, you're the hardest. You're the hardest person anyone I've ever tried to deal with at Brighton a Day. You're getting your info. But yeah, what we do is we send baskets to any of the families we've ever worked with. We never take them off the list just because we realized Christmas sucks when you've lost your family because it's just a huge reminder of what isn't there, not what is there. And so we always want all of them to know we remember your loss because we feel it too. So it's really cool because Brindy's parents, they lost a child and their child's been gone 35, 40 years and they still feel it and they love it. Like, and I'm so happy that we can do that because like we get so many donations whenever we ask because we've never taken a dime for any of this stuff. Like some people are dirtbags and they want money for their foundations because they want to make money. Nothing like that for us. Like, and I'm so glad because we always have money in there and when something comes up, we can do something, you know, because it's anyway. So that's what we do.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
Anything else before we get to these movies? Don't want you to be flying back to Florida and be like, damn it, I should have said that.
I'll never say that. No, I think the biggest thing I have learned through all this, so we're 8.5 years out now, and it's gotten way better, way easier. We've learned a lot about each other. I've learned a lot about myself. We've put in a lot of work. Like people just always like that saying, you know, time heals. No, it doesn't. Time and work heals. And we've done a lot of work. We do, you know, I've got into yoga so that way I could learn to do a lot of that different mental healing. And then I read. We read, we listen to podcasts. Kevin does cold plunges. We have so many things that we continually do all the time to continue to heal. And because we do that, we have a beautiful life. We are very happy.
You don't have to stay in the shit forever.
Yeah. And I would never want it to happen, but it did. And I'm a better person now. I know I am. I like myself more now.
You guys are pretty cool.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, we're stoked. We're happy to be here. I mean, it's always hard. Like, it's almost like, I'm like, well, I didn't say you're excited to go. And she's like, no, why would you be excited? I'm not excited. I'm just saying, like,
he's like, you excited? I'm like, no,
like,
I know I'm going to cry. And
yeah. Like when you're talking about the loss of your child or it's like, that's difficult. Also, it's connecting where it's like, this is my first time meeting you. You're my boy now, you know? I want to say you're my boy, Blue, but you haven't. Yeah.
Yeah, I say that a lot. I don't think people catch that one.
Yeah, that's dodgeball right there.
Yeah. Movie time. Who's going first?
I'll go first.
Top 3 favorite movies.
Oh, you asked me this last night.
Yeah, I tried to set you up for this.
Of all time. If you want to do TV shows because you're not a movie girl, that's fine. Kevin's going to go first.
Number 1.
Hold on. Let's start with 3.
Number 3. See, the number 3 is hard because like 3 and 4 were like right there. I had them on my phone because I didn't want to forget.
Oh my gosh. He's got notes.
Real quick, let me change the battery in this.
All right.
Okay. Which one do I want to go with?
Bethany, you got 3 movies ready?
No.
She has one. It's funny when I asked her the question, she acted like she had it all down. You know, it's like, and she
I
does
have
not.
one. That's all I can think of. Oh, I could think of another one. I could think of a few. Okay, I think
you can use TV shows too if you want. If you can't get there.
Do I watch? I mean,
South Park.
That's a new favorite.
You like South Park?
Oh, we love South Park. We get high every night.
We get high every night and watch South Park.
It's the best.
It's fantastic.
They're deep. The show's it's actually a deep show.
Deep.
They actually are.
I swear to God.
Really political.
Yeah.
No, it gets you thinking.
Yeah,
so when I say we stay up talking for hours, we'll be watching South Park. I'm like, oh my God, did you just think this because of that? And he's like, yes. And then we'll go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, South Park's great.
I never watched it.
We had never watched a single episode until like 3 months ago.
You're kidding me.
We binged it.
So what happened
You got to watch the Joseph Smith.
Oh, we saw that. Yeah.
That one I had already seen.
Yeah.
Anything about making fun of Mormons, I've seen them all. They're hilarious.
Dum dum dum.
Yeah. Dumb.
What happened was when they came out when I was in high school,
smart.
my senior year in high school. And I told you about this. I was on like a student council retreat thing. And some of my best friends in high school were these guys. And they all wanted to watch South Park because it was new but it was on TV. And I'm like, cool, I'm in. So I go sit down with all these guys to watch South Park. And one of the teachers comes in and she was like, you guys are all Mormon. You're supposed to be good Mormon kids. You're supposed to be representing, lays into us about how bad South Park is. I never watched it again.
Wow.
Like, I felt so guilty. And then, so now I'm like, you bastards. I could be watching
It's
it for
coming
like the
full
third
circle
time.
now.
Yes. I love it. I love it.
All right, Kevin. Top 3 favorite movies.
All right.
Desert Island style.
So number 1, or we're going number 3.
Number three.
Number 3 is a tie between Aliens, because I loved that as a child, and Truman Show, because I feel like it still applies, you know, like leaving our religion and stuff. And then just life in general is just weird, where I feel like we could all be on the Truman Show still.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.
Yeah, exactly. Number 2 is Shawshank Redemption. And number 1 is Wolf on Wall Street for me.
Wow.
I love Wolf
coming
on
in
Wall Street.
strong.
Yeah, I love that show. There's times that she's like, I will watch that. I could watch that like every day. Like,
loves
I
it.
love it. Love it.
I love it too,
All
so I
of
don't
it.
care.
It's a movie you can hop in wherever and just start watching.
Totally.
Like hour in, 20 minutes in, wherever.
It's great. Same with Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
If that ever comes on TNT, I'm watching the whole thing
hooked.
wherever it's at. Yeah.
Yeah, Shawshank's classic.
Yeah.
Okay, good movie list. Bethany, what do we got over
Number
here?
3 is This Is 40.
You ever seen that?
it?
Yeah, with Paul Rudd.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so
I feel like that movie
relatable.
is connected to Knocked Up.
It is. It's
Yeah.
it's
That's
It's
the
the
same
sequel.
family.
It's the
Yeah,
sequel.
I love Knocked Up.
Yeah.
This Is 40 is just the depiction of life, I swear. Like, it's
It
exactly
is.
how I feel about life. I remember watching it when I was younger, like in my 30s, like early 30s, and I'm like, this is depressing. I don't even like this movie.
Yeah.
And then I watched it in my 40s. I'm like, no, this is like spot on. This is
Yeah, like when
life.
Paul Rudd's like at the fantasy baseball draft.
Yeah. He's having
This
it
is
live.
worse than cheating. And he's like, how is this worse than cheating?
Number 2 is Step Brothers.
I thought that was going to be your number 1
You're
for
a
sure.
comedy fan.
I love comedy, and I think Step Brothers is probably the funniest.
I'm
I've
not-
seen it 100 times. I quote it regularly. It's amazing.
I'm not calling him dad. Even if there's a fire.
Yeah. Yeah. If he comes over, I'm going to.
It was me.
My kids didn't even watch the show, and they knew all the quotes from it because we're always mentioning
It was me and Sloan Ketter smoking that shit up. You never smoked weed with someone named Johnny.
Yeah. Johnny Hopkins.
It was
Me and Johnny.
Johnny Hopkins, and Sloan Ketter.
That movie is
good.
amazing.
Yeah, that movie.
Yeah.
My number 1 movie, and I say it's number 1 because I've seen it so many times, and I'll continue to watch it over and over and over again, is Bad Moms.
Bad Mom. I have never seen Bad
And
Moms.
you probably wouldn't totally get it.
It's a great show.
It's hilarious. And it was my life living in Utah. So watch it.
Bad Moms. Okay.
I was the bad mom. I was the Mila Kunis. And the other women were how I felt going places in Utah. So
That's
there you go.
great.
Watch
I'll
it.
have to give it a watch tonight. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yes,
Talking
thank you.
about Brighton and now the Brighton a Day Foundation. You guys are inspiring to me. Thank you for what you've done for me in my life. And life's 10% what happens to you and 90% what you're going to do about it.